Robert Williger, thanks so much for coming back on to Talk Beliefs from your home in Florida, USA. Last time on the show, you spoke about growing up in an Orthodox Jewish community and your experiences in the US and abroad, where your beliefs were tested and doubts began to form. Well, in 2021, you came out publicly as an atheist and now spend a lot of time writing and speaking out, not only about Jewish Orthodoxy, but cult behavior as well. So what are your conclusions about some of the tactics used by Jewish groups to influence others? And would you consider them reminiscent of cults?
Absolutely. With my background being in marketing, I've done a lot of study on influence and persuasion. And really that's part of what I discovered was when I was able to take a step back, was realizing that the ways that these Orthodox Jewish outreach groups, kiruv is the Hebrew term that they use for outreach. And when you look at these organizations, in America, the big ones are going to be, Chabad, NCSY, the one I was involved in. There's Aisha Torah, which is more focused in Israel, but does have some offices. And when you look at really the techniques of these groups, they're using undue influence and trying to convince people. And usually who they're focused on is either trying to get teenagers. That's where NCSY is really focused on. Chabad will also try that a bit. And where Chabad is also looking a lot is at more vulnerable populations. Maybe people who are experiencing a breakup, going through a divorce, at a point in time where they're questioning things, and they're going to try to bring them into the group. And one thing which I wasn't aware of until studying cults was like the idea of love bombing. And that is definitely something I see. And I think some of the people are really doing it sincerely. I don't know if they really understand. But again, it doesn't change the fact that this is what they're doing, just trying to show people, oh, come with us. And then when you look at the arguments that they're using, they are twisting words, they're manipulating language. Again, if we're looking at any of the cult models, I mean, if we look at the Bite model, if we look at Robert J. Lifton, if we look at any of these, we're going to see that the Orthodox groups are doing the same thing that any sort of cult group. The only difference I'm going to say is that it's not solely for a purpose of profit. While they are bringing in money from these things and eventually members will be paying, I don't believe that it's being done with the intention of trying to recruit, so it would be different from a Nexium or something like that it's all about the power. But Judaism itself, I do not believe is a cult, but when you get into Orthodox Judaism, you're definitely getting into high demand religion. And when you look at the models, it's hitting all the points. I mean, definitely loaded language, inside group versus outside group. So there really is a lot of similarities in what they're doing. And if you try to use rationality and reason looking at their arguments, you will see that it falls apart, that they are trying to get people. And Jewish law is a very complex topic. I mean, nobody, even the most learned rabbis, cannot know all of Jewish law because these are hundreds of books written mostly in Aramaic. And so it's very difficult for people to call out and be able to counter because people have so much room to be able to twist and manipulate the messaging.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Rob, when you say love bombing and loaded language, what do you mean by that?
Love bombing means that you're going to be showing a tremendous amount of affection towards new recruits. So you're going to be extremely hospitable. You're going to make sure that they're very comfortable because you want them to be coming back. I mean, for example, in Lubavitch Chabad, say you showed up for a Sabbath services on Saturday. multiple people are likely to invite you to their home for lunch, which seems like a very nice thing, and it is a nice thing to do. But part of it is it's being done with that intention that they want to show you a good time and show you what this religion, show you the best side of the religion, the glossy color brochure.
Yeah.
As far as loaded language, what you have is a lot of inside language that's known to the known group. And they'll drop these terms. And a lot of them in Judaism, a lot of them might be the Hebrew term that even if somebody is speaking in English, they will drop certain terms using religious language. And that's kind of trying to manipulate you and put you in a certain direction and push language in a certain way with their motivation.
Yes, because I know that a lot of groups, when they refer to outsiders, they call them worldlies or something like that. Is there a term for people who are non-Jewish, for instance?
Well, there is they do refer to either, sometimes they refer to them as the B'nai Noach, which are the children of Noah, because there's a concept in Judaism of the seven Noahide laws, which Orthodox Jews believe that everyone in the world is obligated, and these are things like no killing, one God, things like that. They may use the term, Gentile is also used. So there will be terms used to talk about, the other groups.
While you were in high school, you became part of a Jewish outreach program where young Jewish boys and girls are encouraged not only to be more religious, but to go out and inspire other Jewish youngsters as well. Although seemingly harmless organizations, you've identified them as being quite dangerous. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, there are definitely dangers, because anytime you're putting people under a system of control, and that's the thing, once you enter the framework of Orthodox Judaism, you are basically accepting a framework that is going to control every aspect of your life. And the problem is they don't even tell you all the things that you're getting into, because they know that some of them are going to sound crazy. They know that they're going to be doing stuff. So that's where I feel it's manipulative, is that, and especially when you're dealing with teenagers, that you're not showing them the complete story. And that's the biggest danger, is that you are shutting out any sort of contrary information. Whereas, something I like to point out sometimes in my social media others is, when you look at atheist groups, they'll tell you, read the Bible. They'll say, read the Bible, just read it with an open mind, because they're not scared. But when you get into these outreach organizations, they're going to start telling you to only listen to their information. And they're going to say, no, you don't want to see that outside stuff because, they're out to get us. That stuff's a bunch of lies. And that's really, I think, where the big danger is trying to close up people's minds. And then you have just everything else with what comes with a religious lifestyle, and how, with what our society, because, it's just teaching these kids that this is the one way, which is not true. And especially to prey on teenagers who've had yet to experience the world. And, it's when they're trying to get them, because that once they get to college, it's going to be a lot harder to get them. They're still going to try to get them there. But I think that's the thing. And once people get into this, then they're falling into a world where it's very close-minded, where it's very authoritarian, and they're not really letting people, express themselves and be who they are. And, a lot of people say in religion, I don't feel oppressed. But when you're inside something, it's very hard to feel that oppression. But it's like you hear people talk about things like there's so many things that it permeates into your life. For example, Orthodox Jewish women generally will not sing in front of a group of men. So basically, I mean, you have people who are taking decisions that they're going to make as a teenager that will impact, like I know somebody who was a friend of mine who was Orthodox, who was very interested in theater. And he once asked an Orthodox Jew who had made it onto Broadway, one of the few, and he said, "What advice do you have for an aspiring Orthodox Jewish actor?" And he said, "Find a new profession because it's not going to work out for you." And I think that's the real danger, is that people are just limiting themselves because of this worldview.
Robert, we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitic hate speech, especially online. So how does the issue of anti-Semitism impact people like you who are trying to speak out about the dangers of orthodoxy?
It definitely does have an impact. We have definitely seen since 2016, we have seen, I mean, and even if you look at groups like the Anti-Defamation League and FBI statistics, we are seeing a documented increase in anti-Semitic attacks. And now when anti-Semites attack Jews, they don't care whether you believe or not. And that's why, to me, even though I am, I identify as atheist, I am still culturally Jewish, being that Judaism, and this is something that I think is important to explain, Judaism is a bit of an ethno-religion, that there are ethnic and race elements to it along with religion. And that's where it kind of differs from other major religions. And I mean, the Nazis only cared if you had one Jewish grandparent. I mean, they didn't care what you believed because they felt that you're blood. So it's something that even though I'm outside that world, when attacks happen on Jewish people, I mean, it could be humanistic Jews who don't even believe in God because they don't care. The anti-Semites aren't looking. And we've seen since 2016, at least in America, a tremendous increase. A lot of it has been latent feelings that people felt they were able to start publicly expressing when the world changed around that time. And also then we've seen since where it really impacts me and other, former Orthodox creators is it makes it difficult for us to speak out about certain things. Because when I look at some of the other former religious, like I'm going to say the ex-Mormon community, when I look at the stuff they're doing on TikTok, and they make some really entertaining stuff, it's a bit harder to do that stuff as a former Orthodox Jew when you know that people's lives are actually threatened in order for them to do this. I mean, that people have risked their lives for this stuff. It makes it difficult to cover some of the things. Also, it puts you in a position. I actually just started reading this book, Religion Caught in Its Own Net by Yaron Yadan. And he points out, so a line that I really liked was that the conclusions of his study and research are offered here to the reader without fright of those who cry anti-Semitism at any critical discussion or acknowledgement of Judaism's sins. And that's another problem, is that those in the Orthodox community, those that are still there, the way they try to silence creators like myself and the others out there is they'll accuse us of spreading anti-Semitism with our anti-religious views. And there's definitely a difference that you are able to criticize the religion, you are able to talk about the religion without, being actually spreading anti-Semitism. Because, I mean, the anti-Semites are going to have their stuff, whether, it doesn't matter whoever's creating content, those talking about their religious life, anti-Semites can use that to say, look at these people, what they're doing. So the argument, while it is a serious problem, it's also used in an attempt to silence people. Like there's a Jewish organization I'm seeing now, the Aguda Israel, and the New York Times has recently had a few exposés about the lack of education in the ultra-Orthodox schools in New York. And they're trying to accuse the New York Times of spreading anti-Semitism. So it's a real balance, because it's a real tough situation, because there's stuff that we want to speak out about, but at times, and especially like recently, I had some content prepared, but then when Kanye West came out with his, I'm going to go DEF CON, 3, I didn't feel comfortable putting out a couple of the videos that I had started working on, because, I start thinking about, so what these people, in addition to just the hatred that they're spreading, they're silencing people in the community who want to do good. Even those that are within the community. Like there's an Orthodox organization that's out there fighting against, the systemic sexual abuse that faces every religious group. And people will come at them and tell them, you shouldn't be talking about this stuff because it will spread anti-Semitism. And that's the dangerous balance. And that's the problem we're faced with, that I think is unique more to Judaism than other groups, is that if you are a former religious Jew trying to create content, you do need to be sensitive to the fact, but you also need to balance that you shouldn't be silenced, because condemning negative actions in Judaism is not anti-Semitism. Also, I think a lot of the anti-Semitism, it may be harder for people because a lot of that comes from what's known as dog whistle anti-Semitism. Dog whistle racism is a concept very common in online communication. The way people might say when speaking about African Americans, they may call for civility. Let's be more civil, where, this very uncivil, where they're being racist, but they don't want to get stopped by the, monitors. Similar, you'll see that on Jewish content. You'll see people who will comment "Free Palestine" on some video that some Jewish teenager made, an American Jewish teenager. That I'm not saying, I don't want to get, the Israeli-Palestinian issue is an extremely complex issue going on for decades. If anyone thinks they're going to be able to solve that on social media on any side, they're crazy. But what you'll see is people will come into a Jewish creator's comments, and I'll sometimes even get it, and they'll be like "Free Palestine," which has nothing to do with what the content is. Obviously, if somebody's making a video about Israel, then you're opening yourself up to criticism of the policies of the Israeli government. But if you're just making a video about Judaism, and especially if you're an American, then bringing in Palestine is just a coded way of trying to, show an anti-Semitic statement. And I think that's really what we're seeing a lot of. So again, I think it's really the balancing act of trying to call out the negative in the community, but not doing anything that's going to provoke the hatred.
Yes, because what we're doing here is we're calling out cult-like behavior, which could be in any group. It's not an ad hominem attack, is it?
No, absolutely not. There is nothing. If you look at the issues that I speak of among, Orthodox Judaism, where my focus is, it's really about where they're trying to, interfere in American politics, trying to, create a theocracy. And it's about calling out just the negative things. And again, things like the sexual abuse. We've seen it in every, the Catholic Church is well known. We've seen all these things. They happen. They're in any system of control. It doesn't even need to be a religion. If you look at political cults, as we now see going on, or if we see certain multi-level marketing, you've probably met with people in those. It's, it doesn't even need to have a religious component. I think whenever there's a system of control and an absolute hierarchy, we're going to have these dangers.
You continue to speak out on TikTok and other platforms about what you've learned and experienced, but I'm sure you're aware that not everyone who is doubting their faith, be it Jewish Orthodoxy or a similar belief system, feels confident enough to step away from a faith that may be holding them back. So for anyone who's watching this right now, what advice would you give to them?
Great question. And what I would say is do everything at your own pace. Take your time. Don't be afraid to question, though. You should never be afraid of getting information, because information can only help. And I understand that it is not easy to walk away. It took me years of living in silence before I was willing to speak out. And I understand even now, and I mean, I've talked about this on my TikTok videos, that, you know, in some ways it's a privilege to be able to speak out, because I do know that there's people in religious communities who their entire income, all of their, you know, their professionals, their entire client base is part of their religious community, you know, if they're in insurance and things like that, or legal, or doctors, that every one of their clients is a member of their community. So I understand. But here's the thing. There are resources out there. There are groups, and that's the beauty of the internet. Look for the groups out there. If you look on Reddit, you can be completely anonymous, and every major religious group, there's an ex-Jew, there's an ex-Mormon, there's an ex-Muslim, there's an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I mean, any of those groups, there's going to be Facebook groups where people, you're going to have people along different points in this journey. So maybe some people who are trying to find ways to stay in. So I just think that what's most important is don't be afraid to ever question anything, and always have your mind open and be willing to at least read something, because, you know, it's not going to hurt you. I mean, as much as they say, and there's anyone who's trying to keep you from finding information, that should be a red flag to you. But I think what's most important is go at your own pace, do it as you're comfortable. Just as within a religion, there shouldn't be a strict structure coming out of a religion. Each person needs to do what's best for them, what's right for them. But what I would finally say is, even if you're not able to leave the religion because of your family circumstances, because of that, if you need to stay in, there still is a benefit to, even if you're going to keep doing it, to have some of the mental freedom that may come from learning that some of this stuff isn't as true as they tell you it is. So I think that even if your physical situation can't change, there is definitely a benefit to letting yourself have that mental freedom and letting your brain expand and think what's outside of the box of religion.
Robert Williger, thank you very much indeed.
And thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.